The dangerous force inside you, pushing everyone away. Carl Jung, Psychological Structure. There is a silent, invisible architect living deep within the recesses of your mind, a force so potent and so pervasive that it dictates the quality of your relationships, the trajectory of your career, and the very way you perceive reality without you ever realizing it is there. Think for a moment about those recurring patterns in your life that seem to haunt you like a persistent ghost. Perhaps it is a sudden, inexplicable coldness you feel toward someone you once loved, or a recurring conflict with colleagues that always seems to follow the same script, regardless of the job. Maybe it is that overwhelming sense of irritation you feel when you encounter a specific type of personality, a reaction so visceral that it feels almost physical. You might tell yourself that these people are the problem, that you simply have bad luck in love, or that the world is filled with difficult individuals, but there is a much more unsettling possibility that we must confront. What if the very walls you feel are closing in on you were built by your own hands in the dark? What if there is a dangerous force inside you, operating in the shadows of your consciousness, that is actively pushing everyone away while you consciously wonder why you feel so alone? This is not a matter of simple bad habits or poor social skills. It is a fundamental aspect of the human psychological structure that the legendary Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to map out. You have likely experienced those moments where you felt like a stranger to yourself, perhaps saying something so cruel or acting in a way so out of character that you later asked, "What came over me?" We all have a public face, a version of ourselves that we carefully curate and present to the world to gain acceptance and fit into the social fabric. We want to be seen as kind, competent, logical, and composed. But beneath that polished surface, there is a vast subterranean reservoir of everything we have rejected, suppressed, or denied about ourselves since the moment we were born. This internal landscape is not just a collection of memories. It is a living, breathing part of your psyche that Jung called the shadow. The problem is that while you may choose to ignore the shadow never ignores you. It is this hidden entity that acts as a saboteur in your most intimate connections, creating a rift between you and the people who matter most. You might feel a sense of identification with this struggle right now, recognizing that despite your best intentions to be open and loving, there is a friction in your life that you cannot explain. You find yourself pushing people away just when they get too close, or perhaps you find yourself surrounded by people but still feeling an impenetrable wall of isolation. But why would our own minds work against us in such a profound way? Why would our psychological structure be designed to sabotage our need for connection? This is the central mystery of the Jungian perspective. It suggests that our internal world is not a single unified ego, but a complex system of competing forces. To understand why you might be pushing people away, we have to look at the mechanism of projection, which is perhaps the most dangerous and deceptive tool the human mind possesses. Projection is the process by which we take an internal quality that we cannot accept in ourselves and unconsciously place it onto someone else. If you have ever met someone and felt an instant, intense dislike for them without any logical reason, you were likely witnessing your shadow in action. You weren't seeing that person for who they truly are. You were seeing a mirror of the very traits you have buried deep within your own soul. But there is something even more profound happening beneath the surface of these everyday irritations, a detail that almost nobody notices until it has already ruined their most important relationships. To understand the weight of this force, we must first look at how the ego and the persona are formed. From the time we are children, we are taught what is good and what is bad. We learn that being loud is disruptive, that being angry is dangerous, or that being vulnerable is a sign of weakness. To survive and thrive, we build the persona, which is the mask we wear to negotiate with society. It is the good student, the reliable employee, or the stoic provider. However, every time we emphasize a light trait in our persona, we cast a corresponding shadow. If your persona is built on being perpetually helpful and selfless, your shadow becomes the repository for your repressed selfishness and resentment. The more you try to be perfect, the darker and more energized the shadow becomes. This is where the danger begins to leak into your external life. Because the ego cannot tolerate seeing these dark traits in the mirror, it looks for them in the people around you. You begin to see your own suppressed anger in your partner, your own hidden insecurity in your friends, and your own unacknowledged greed in your colleagues. You are not interacting with human beings. You are interacting with the ghosts of your own psyche. It is at this point that everything starts to make sense regarding why your relationships might feel like a series of repeating cycles. When you project your shadow onto others, you create a psychological distance that is impossible to bridge. You push people away because you are actually trying to push away the parts of yourself that they represent to you. If you have repressed your own need for power, you will find yourself surrounded by people you perceive as controlling, and you will fight them or distance yourself from them, never realizing that the battle is actually taking place within your own heart. This creates a tragic paradox. The more you strive to be a good person by suppressing your flaws, the more those flaws will manifest in your environment, forcing you into a life of conflict and loneliness. But there is a detail that almost nobody perceives. The shadow is not inherently evil. It is simply the part of you that has been denied a voice. It contains your untapped creativity, your raw vitality, and your hidden strengths. But because it has been locked in the basement for so long, it has turned sour. As we go deeper into Jung's structure of the mind, we find that this force doesn't just push people away through conflict. It can also push them away through a strange kind of gravity. Have you ever felt that some people seem to have an aura of heaviness or a void that seems to suck the energy out of a room? This often happens when a person's shadow is so large and unacknowledged that it begins to eclipse their conscious personality. They become defensive, reactive, and hypersensitive to criticism, because any slight from the outside world feels like an attack on their fragile persona. They must keep everyone at a distance to prevent anyone from seeing the truth they are hiding even from themselves. This creates a profound sense of exhaustion in those around them. People start to drift away, not because they don't care, but because they cannot navigate the minefield of projections that the other person has laid out. And the most heartbreaking part is that the person doing the pushing feels like the victim. They feel misunderstood and abandoned, which only causes them to retreat further into their persona, making the shadow even more volatile. But there is something even more profound happening in the way we choose our partners and friends. Jung suggested that we are often unconsciously drawn to people who manifest the very traits we have repressed. This is why the orderly person often falls for the chaotic person, or the emotional person falls for the rational person. Initially, this feels like a completion, a sense of finding the missing piece of the puzzle. However, because we have not integrated these traits into our own personality, the fascination eventually turns to frustration. The very things we once loved about the other person become the things we despise most. The spontaneity we admired becomes irresponsibility. The strength we admired becomes rigidity. We begin to punish the other person for carrying the weight of our own shadow. This is the moment where the dangerous force inside you begins to dismantle the relationship. You start to see the other person as a villain, and in doing so, you justify your own withdrawal or hostility. You believe you are protecting yourself from them, but you are actually running away from the opportunity to grow. Here is the detail that almost everyone misses. The traits you find most intolerable in others are usually the keys to your own liberation. If you find yourself constantly pushing away people who are too emotional, it is likely a sign that you have a deep, unaddressed emotional well within you that you are terrified to dive into. If you distance yourself from people you deem arrogant, it may be that you have suppressed your own healthy sense of self-worth and ambition. The external world acts as a massive Rorschach test, reflecting back to us the internal landscape we refuse to acknowledge. This is why simply finding better friends, or starting a new relationship rarely works in the long run. You can change the actors, but if the script remains the same, the play will always end in the same tragedy. You will continue to carry that dangerous force with you, across borders and through decades, until you decide to turn around and face it. The real danger of the shadow is not that it exists, but that it remains unconscious. When a force is unconscious, it acts upon you as if it were fate. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is the explanation for the bad luck people think they have. They are not victims of the world. They are victims of their own lack of self-awareness. The force pushing people away is actually a cry for help from your own soul, a demand that you stop pretending to be a one-dimensional character and start embracing the full, complex, and sometimes dark reality of being human. If you continue to ignore this, the walls will only grow taller. You will find yourself in a self-imposed prison of your own righteousness, wondering why the world feels so cold and why genuine connection seems so elusive. Now, we must move toward the revelation that changes everything. The discovery that Jung made was that the shadow is not a monster to be defeated, but a brother or sister to be reconciled with. The reason this force is pushing everyone away is that it is trying to get your attention. It is creating chaos in your external life to force you to look inward. The evil or annoying qualities you see in others are actually disowned parts of yourself that are starving for recognition. When you finally stop fighting the people around you and start looking at what those people trigger in you, the entire structure of your reality begins to shift. You realize that the person you were pushing away was actually a messenger. They were showing you the parts of your own psyche that you need to heal. This is the moment of radical responsibility. It is the realization that you are the common denominator in all your failed connections, and that the force inside you is not an enemy, but a neglected part of your own strength. This leads us to the most important explanation of all, the process of integration. To stop pushing people away, you must learn to own your shadow. This does not mean becoming a bad person. It means becoming a whole person. It means acknowledging that you have the capacity for anger, for greed, for selfishness, and for weakness. When you accept these things in yourself, you no longer need to project them onto others. When you are no longer terrified of your own darkness, you are no longer threatened by the darkness in others. The irritation that used to drive a wedge between you and your partner vanishes, replaced by a deep sense of empathy and understanding. You realize that they too are struggling with their own shadow. This is the only way to achieve true intimacy. True connection is not two personas masking their flaws and pretending to be perfect. It is two whole human beings who have faced their own depths and can therefore stand in the presence of another person's reality without judgment or fear. But this process is not easy. It requires a level of honesty that most people find unbearable. It means admitting that you are not the hero of every story you tell about your life. It means looking at the people you have pushed away and realizing that you were the one who made the situation impossible. It means recognizing that the dangerous force was actually your own repressed vitality, turned toxic by neglect. This is why so many people choose to live in loneliness rather than face their shadow. It is easier to believe that the world is wrong than to believe that you are incomplete. However, the cost of this avoidance is a life of superficiality and isolation. You may be safe from the messiness of deep connection, but you are also cut off from the source of your own meaning. The profound reflection we must end with is this: the quality of your life is determined by your relationship with the unknown parts of yourself. We spend so much of our time trying to change our external circumstances, trying to find the right person, the right job, or the right social circle, thinking that these things will finally make us feel connected and at peace. But the right environment can never fix an unreconciled inner world. If you do not deal with the dangerous force inside you, you will turn even the most perfect paradise into a desert. The walls you build to keep the world out are the same walls that keep you trapped inside. Consider the possibility that every person who has ever annoyed you, hurt you, or walked away from you was a mirror reflecting a part of your soul that you have yet to claim. If you feel the urge to push someone away today, stop and ask yourself, what is it in them that I cannot stand in myself? What part of my own story am I refusing to read? This is the journey of individuation, the path to becoming the person you were meant to be before the world told you who you should be. It is a path of fire, but it is the only path that leads to genuine connection. The force inside you is only dangerous because it is ignored. When it is seen, when it is named, and when it is integrated, it ceases to be a saboteur and becomes your greatest ally. It gives you the depth to understand others, the strength to set healthy boundaries, and the courage to be vulnerable. The loneliness you feel is not a sentence, it is a signal. It is an invitation to go down into the basement of your psyche, to find the parts of yourself you have discarded, and to bring them back into the light. Only then will you stop pushing the world away and finally allow yourself to be seen, not for the mask you wear, but for the complex, beautiful, and whole human being you actually are. The next time you feel that familiar coldness rising within you, or that impulse to retreat and isolate, remember that it is not the other person you are afraid of. You are afraid of what they are revealing about you. But in that revelation lies your freedom. Do not turn away from the mirror. Do not run from the shadow. Stand still, look closely, and realize that the person you have been searching for in everyone else has been waiting for you in the dark all along. The dangerous force is not a monster to be feared, but a power to be reclaimed. And once you reclaim it, you will find that the world is no longer a place to hide from, but a place to finally, truly belong. Your journey toward others must first begin with a journey toward yourself, for you can only meet another person as deeply as you have met your own soul. The walls will only come down when you no longer need them to hide who you are. This is the wisdom of Jung, and it is the key to breaking the cycle of isolation that has kept you a prisoner for far too long. Accept the challenge of your own darkness, and you will finally find the light you have been seeking in the eyes of others.